Hello YouTube, it's Mr. Mags here, and Pokemon Gym Leaders are considered some of the best of any given region that you travel to during your Pokemon journey. However, Gym Leaders don't always seem to bring their best when they challenge you. I would argue even that a lot of the teams that the Game Freak decided to give these Gym Leaders are straight up bad. I've gone on record multiple times on this channel and a lot of other videos and comments on whatever on the internet. I've also gone on record saying that a lot of Pokemon Gym Leader teams leave a lot to be desired. Either you feel that they have the wrong ace, they're not using Pokemon of their region, they're not using Pokemon of their type. There's a lot of different factors can determine whether or not a gym leader has a good or bad team. And today I just wanted to go over every single Pokemon gym leader and determine if I personally believe if they have a good or bad team. And at the end, try to determine how many of them actually have bad teams. Because just thinking about it, I personally would have assumed it's honestly over half, maybe a little top heavy in the first four generations. But the findings that I uncovered throughout my research here was actually kind of surprising. So without further ado, let's just jump right into my little presentation I made for y'all. And throughout this, we'll be able to determine how many Pokemon gym leaders actually do in fact have bad teams. Okay, let's jump right into it in order to determine how many gym leaders have bad teams. So here's the criteria that I am going to be judging each individual gym leader on. First up, a gym leader uses multiple previous gen Pokemon unnecessarily, meaning they use Pokemon that are not native to the region that they are the gym leader of, especially when other Pokemon of their type are available. A good example, Watson, which I'll get to much later and more in depth, him not using an Electric or a Electric and instead using all Generation 1 Pokemon, that is, that is that is a, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, let's jump right into this in order to determine how many Pokemon gym leaders have bad teams. So here are the criteria that I personally will be judging each gym leader on. First up, we're going to be seeing if they use multiple previous gen Pokemon unnecessarily, meaning that they use Pokemon that are not native to their region when other options are available. For example, it's a meme that pretty much every single Generation 2 gym leader uses a lot of Pokemon that are from the Kanto region, despite there being a lot of Pokemon native to the Johto region that they could have used instead. Next, we'll be determining if a gym leader reuses Pokemon of the same evolutionary line unnecessarily. Again, this happens a lot, especially in Johto. For some reason, even though there are a lot of other Pokemon of the region that they could use, they did not need to double up. Like, for example, Price has a Seal and a Dugong, one of those not even being a Pokemon of their type, which I'll get to in a second. But there are other ice types that Price could have pulled from. He did not need to double up. Whereas someone like Morty, I don't really love how they did it, but like in order to make a full team of at least three, again, his team has other problems. But if you were to have a team of three ghost types, theoretically you would have to double up on a Haunter or a Gengar or whatever you ended up deciding. But again, his team is bad for other reasons. We'll get to that. But that happens so often when a gym leader does not need to double up on a specific evolutionary line. when they do. And kind of tackling something I mentioned before, when they use Pokemon not of their special type or theme unnecessarily. So obviously, the vast majority of gym leaders have a specific type that they specialize in. Any deviations should have some kind of intentionality to it, or any, and this kind of applies to all three of these. If there are specifically, you know, doubling up on evolutionary line or Pokemon not of the region, if it's specifically to fit some kind of theme or specifically if it would make sense that that trainer would go to a location that that Pokemon is from very often, it is on their team, that's fine. But if they just have a lot of seemingly random Pokemon that they have no business regularly using, that is what I would consider having a bad team. And last little criteria here, I will base this solely on the character's first appearance. I'm not going to be including secondary or like third versions like yellow. I'm not going to be including remakes. I will be counting Black and White 2 for the gym leaders I've introduced in that game, but I will not be counting. I will not be like reanalyzing, let's say, Elisa from Black and White 2, just Elisa from the first Black and White. So, yeah, I will probably mention things here and there from remakes or from third versions, but this determination will be solely based on the first time you ever have a chance to fight said gym leader. Okay, so here is how this presentation is going to work. I'm going to show the trainer's team, and then you'll either see a check mark, a X, or just a blank neutral face if I felt like it didn't really hit enough of these criteria that it's bad, but it could have been better, or I feel like the team is bad, but they really had no choice. And some of those will happen later, but most of these will be either good or bad. And then at the end of the region, I will have a running total of how many are bad. I will not be counting any of the meh or the neutral ones, only how many I believe are bad. But after each gym leader, if I personally feel like I can make a better team, I would then put that team at the next slide. Okay, so let's get into it. First up, the Kanto region. First up, you know, the classic Brock, the first gym leader of Kanto. And it's a very solid, pun intended, very solid team. Yeah, it's good. Geodude, Onyx. It's a little annoying that his team is something that you fight this team of Geodude and Onyx several times throughout the region. Like any random hiker in a cave will have a Geodude and an Onyx, sometimes multiple. But you never fight a Geodude and an Onyx in a fight before you fight Brock. And if any situation like that comes up where an ace Pokemon becomes more ubiquitous throughout the region, as long as you don't fight it preferably at all, but fight it very much before you go to the gym, that's fine. But because Geodude and Onyx are both at very good levels, Onyx is not very strong, but that's intentional. Because it is the first gym, it is still very tanky to take down, especially since you don't have a lot of special attacks outside of your starters at that point. So Geodude and Onyx is a very good first gym for Kanto. I cannot say the same for Misty's team. Staryu and Starmie is absolutely terrible. In a generation that has so many water types, Staryu and Starmie, this is the prime example of doubling up on an evolutionary line when it is not necessary at all. So my personal fix would be Psyduck and Starmie. Um, it didn't have to be Psyduck. It could be Poliwag or Horsey or Goldeen or Shelder or Seal or Slowpoke or Tentacle, or you get the point. There are so many, so many water types in Generation 1. And the fact that she had a Staryu and a Starmie, that's unacceptable. And something I will mention, because it will be relevant very soon, the nicknames that I gave these Pokemon is the level that you fight them. And so in red and blue, the Staryu and Starmie were 18 and 21 respectively. And if there are any changes to the levels, I will also mention that on the fixed slide. Next up, Lieutenant Surge. This is another one that has a double up for literally no reason. So I consider Lieutenant Surge to have a bad team. I genuinely feel like either Magnemite instead of Pikachu, or I personally always, for some reason in my head, always associate Lieutenant Surge with Electabuzz. Maybe it's just because they decided to give Electabuzz, they decided to make Electabuzz his ace in Gold and Silver. But just the vibe that Electabuzz gives, I personally felt match Lieutenant Surge more than Raichu. But if Raichu has to stay as ace, I don't have a problem with that. Just switch out Pikachu for Magnemite instead. But having Pikachu and Raichu, I personally think that is bad when there are other options. Next, Erica has a genuinely amazing team. I really like how quirky a lot of the earlier gen teams are. I don't think all of them are good, but the quirkiness of it is kind of charming. Having two aces, those Victory Bell and Vileplume, is pretty fascinating. And then having Tangela be 5 levels lower, I think that's a lot of fun. Ideally, maybe you pick one, ideally Vileplume, and have it be Weepin' Bell, Tangela, Vileplume. But I love it. I really like her having two different aces, both being on 29. I think that's a good level for that point of the game. So very good. And there are several other grass types they could have picked, but 3 different grass types, 2 aces. I really like it. I don't have a problem with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee switching the Victory Bell for Weepin' Bell and cementing Vileplume as her ace. I don't have a problem with that, but I've always really liked her having 2 aces in the original Gen 1 games. A team I don't love nearly as much at all is Koga. Coughing Muck, coughing Wheezing. Again, in a generation that felt like it was half full of poison types, you have 3 from the same evolutionary line and then a Muck. Yeah, needless to say, not a good team. But I do just want to shout out his absolutely unhinged yellow team. I'm not going to put this towards the total tally at the end, but 3 Venomoths, 3 Venonats, and a Venomoth. I put the wrong levels. The Venomoth is level 50, and they're all like, I think it's 44, 46, 48, and 50. Again, completely unhinged. I don't know why they did that. Like, they fixed it by making it kind of worse by only having one evolutionary line, but whatever. Again, in a way, I kind of appreciate it for how quirky it is, but it's still not a good team. Yeah, so here's the team that I picked. Venomoth, Tentacruel, Muck, and Wheezing. You could throw Golbat in there. It doesn't really matter instead of Tentacruel or something, but the point is that there are 4 distinct lines of poison types on his team. And I personally never liked the idea of Koga and Sabrina both being on the same level. I always felt like the level curve just went completely out of control, especially if you're trying to hardcore Nuzlocke Kanto. You really can't easily do it. You gotta keep your Pokemon super low and risk losing someone to either Koga or Sabrina, depending on who you choose first. Um, them both being on 43, I always had a problem with. I don't mind Koga being a solid 10 levels higher than Erica, considering once you're able to wake up Snorlax, you may have basically the rest of landlocked Kanto to explore. So all of the cycling road area and everything, basically everything south of Lavender and all of that down there. That's a lot of time that you can build up your team level. So I'm perfectly fine with Koga being level 39. I just felt like 43 is a little too much, and I personally much prefer them cementing Koga as the 5th gym leader and Sabrina as the 6th. Speaking of Sabrina, again, absolutely unhinged team. Why the heck is there a Venomoth on Sabrina's team? Why does she have Kadabra and Alakazam? If it was if Venomoth was a Hypno, I honestly don't know if I would consider it a bad team necessarily, because at least you have three different lines. I still wouldn't love it. I would still prefer, one of the other several psychic types you could have picked from. But Venomoth, especially when you theoretically just fought or are about to fight a poison gym leader. Granted, he doesn't have a Venomoth in red and blue, but it there are many other psychic types that she could have picked from. But she didn't. Venomoth, which actually led a lot of people for a while to believe that Venomoth was part psychic because it was on her team, when no, it's poison bug. I don't know. So yeah, obviously bad team. And again, just like with Koga, I want to shout out her insane yellow team. I won't count it towards the tally, but Abracadabra Alakazam, if that was her yellow team, I actually don't know if I would consider it bad, because the theme of Abracadabra Alakazam is objectively very funny and clearly there's intentionality to it. But I don't, considering it was changed from not having all psychic types to having all psychic types, but it being one line is very strange. Again, I kind of like it per se, but I wouldn't consider it a good team. I like the intentionality, but it's not a team I personally would give. I give something more like this, where it's Mr. Mime, Hypno, Slowbro, Alakazam. And something I'm going to bring up here is I always really liked the earlier generations, 1 through 3 especially, where you have the ace Pokemon of their team, and then you have another one they either lead with or they send it out second to last that's on a slightly higher level than the rest of her team. And I kind of view that as like their pseudo ace. For example, here, I upped her team by 1 level. I think 5 levels after Koga feels about right, especially after everything with Silphco. And after Koga, you can surf. So I think going up 5 levels to 44 feels fine. Alakazam, yeah, it's going to hit super hard regardless of what level it is. I don't think 1 extra level is really going to matter overall. But Mr. Mime being on 43, Slowbro and Hypno being 42, and then Alakazam 44, basically cementing Mr. Mime as her like secondary ace. I always, when throughout this presentation, when I can give, like, when it makes sense to have something else be their secondary ace, I'll point it out. But yeah, Slowbro could have been a Jinx, could be Executor, same with Hypno. But for some reason, for me personally, I just like this makeup the best. Next up, Blaine. I don't know what they were doing with this First of all, the levels are crazy. Growlithe on 42, Ponyta 40, Rapidash, which should be his secondary ace, is 42, and then Arcanine 47. Why is Growlithe and Rapidash both on 42? But on top of that, why is it just two evolutionary lines when there's so many other fire types it could have picked from? Bad team. Really, really bad team. It's super boring. Especially in red and blue, the entire team can be super cheesed since half the team knows agility, the other half knows roar, which does literally nothing. So most of the time, they can either be cheesed by the way the type mechanics work. Because if you throw in a fighting or pure poison type against the Rapidash or Ponyta, I believe they both know agility. They'll just be using agility the whole time. So he's definitely the easiest gym leader in red and blue. So I went to fix it. Pretty standard fix. This is what Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee did. Magmar, Ninetales, Rapidash, Arcanine, still 47. I think that's a solid level for that point in the game. And lastly, Giovanni. This one I went back and forth on of if I thought it was a bad team or not. I ended up going with neutral. I don't love the Rhyhorn and Rhydon. However, in the multiple fights throughout the region, the only other ground type he used who was not on this team right here is Onyx in his first fight in the game corner. And I didn't really want him to have an Onyx necessarily. It just didn't feel like him. That is definitely Brock's Pokemon as far as like on a gym leader team. Like you could put in someone like a Sandslash or a Marowak, but Marowak would feel a little weird considering like they were at least hinted that they're responsible for the death of that one Marowak and Sith in a Lavender Tower. I don't know if Sandslash really fits either. Like I maybe would fix it with Sandslash, but it's not necessary per se. So Rhyhorn, it's fine. You could also say, oh, he should keep his Kangaskhan or Persian, depending on the game, which he actually does keep Persian in yellow. But then Kangaskhan wouldn't be a ground type, so it's fine. It's fine how it is. I don't have any major issues with it. I'm not going to count. He's also special. He's also like it's also him being the villain team leader also kind of throws a wrench in all this. So I'm just going to say he's fine. And again, I would maybe fix it with Sandslash, but it's not necessary. But yeah, I do want to point out something. I find it a little weird that Dugtrio is so low leveled at this point. 42 seems particularly, I personally feel is a little too low for the 8th gym leader, especially when it goes up to 50. And you could argue that they did that in order to make it so that you at least have a fighting chance against him with how Fissure worked in that game, where as long as the opponent is faster than you, Fissure has a chance to hit. However, that's not what you can't argue that because that his Dugtrio didn't know Fissure in red blue. So that's what that is. So for my fixed team, I upped this level just a little bit to 46, made Nidoking and Nidoqueen both 48, and then Rhydon 50. I did want to give a brief shout out to his wild Leaf Green Fire Red team. That is a bad team. That is an objectively really, really bad team. I don't know why they decided to make his Rhydon a Rhyhorn. Now he has 2 Rhyhorns. That's weird. Again, I don't know why they did that, but they did. But I'm not counting that here. This is the first time you fight him, so it is what it is with that. But legitimately, that horrendous team from Leaf Green Fire Red is kind of what made me get on the train to make this video. So that's cool, I guess. Again, I feel like that's a coding error or something, but whatever. Um, so yeah, that's it for Generation One. For Kanto, we have 5 out of 8. Honestly, I would have assumed it was higher. Just thinking back to, you know, thinking back on all the weird decisions made throughout the region. But yeah, 3 of them have at least okay to good teams. So running total of 5 out of 8. Now moving on to Johto. Oh boy. Johto, again, as I've said before, is just basically a meme at this point where people have made countless videos fixing Johto teams specifically to give them Johto Pokemon. So definitely the biggest and worst contender or worst offender of that is Faulkner. Not only is his ace on level 9, one of the junior trainers in his team has a level 9 Spearow, and then you go to fight him and he has a level 9 Pidgeotto. Not only is his strongest Pokemon level 9, it's a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto. 2 Pokemon that you fight. I would, even including the rival, I would conservatively guess you fight 30 Pidgeys throughout your time if you fight the vast majority of trainers along your, in your time in Kanto. That's probably even lowballing it. 30 Pokemon in the Pidgey line. Um, but they decided to also give Faulkner a Pidgey and a Pidgeotto. I know there's at least one trainer in Kanto who has, I think there's one that has multiple Pidgey and Pidgeotto and a Pidgeotto. And I know there's at least a couple in Johto that also have Pidgey and Pidgeotto. So there's, not only are they Gen 1 Pokemon, there's nothing special about this specific team. So obviously terrible, garbage, absolutely nothing good about this. So here, coming up, is probably my first, I'll say, controversial pick. A lot of people, when they theorycraft fixing Faulkner's team, they give him Hoot Hoot and Murkrow. That's completely valid. I like Murkrow a lot. I think kind of giving him this nocturnal aesthetic feels right for Faulkner. However, I feel like Murkrow doesn't work for me personally for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's a little too strong for that point in the game. I think it overlaps with a lot of other teams throughout the game. Ariana in Team Rocket has a Murkrow, and then also Karen of the Elite Four has a Murkrow. It would be unique up to that point in the game, but like I said, I also feel like Murkrow might be a little too strong for that point in the game. It is very weak defensively, so just 1 or 2 rock throws from Rocky, assuming you get Rocky or a Geodude, or if you theoretically could have access to Mareep, which you don't actually in Generation 2 before Violet City. So if you could hit it super effectively, you probably will take it down in 1 or 2 hits tops. But I just, for some reason, it just doesn't work in my head to give him Murkrow. And again, even more controversially, the team I did give him was Hootoo and Doduo. Now, this does not fix the problem at all of having Pidgeotto, being from Kanto. Dodo is definitely a Kanto Pokemon. However, I will give some leeway throughout this entire video. I will give some leeway to Pokemon that were given no love at all in the region that they came from. So Doduo was on no major trainers teams throughout the entire region. Like there are obviously there are bird keepers that have Doduo and Dodrio, but a lot of them are optional trainers, and it it just feels like a Pokemon that someone somewhere in Kanto, a rival, an Elite Four member, some which that might be a video for later. but as far as Dodo and Dodrio as it is in Kanto, they're shown no love on any major teams. So seeing a Doduo, especially this early in Johto, um, would feel like something at least more special than Pidgeotto. Also, not to mention, these are in-game. The in-game lore is that these are Pokemon that were given to Faulkner from his dad, and you can just kind of imply that or infer that he traveled around between both regions a lot, and this Doduo he caught in Kanto and was very fond of it, and it's the strongest Pokemon. But regardless, he has at least one Pokemon that's that's from Johto. So I think it's more or less okay. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but Noctowl was way too strong. And I again just something about Murkrow just doesn't sit right with me personally. So yeah. Hoodoo at 11 and Dodu at 13. Moving on. Bugsy, again, absolutely terrible team. There are so many bug types that you could have picked. However, I do like the Scyther, just like with my argument for Doduo. Scyther is on no teams as far as like major teams go, maybe even period. Maybe someone in Victory Road or something, but I can't think of a single time I've ever played through a Gen 1 game or even the remakes where I fought a Scyther ever. Like I legitimately can't think of a single time about the entire region. So him having Scyther as his ace, I'm perfectly fine with. However, Kakuna, and Metapod are not good. They're not only are they just dead weight, they're also very boring. They're from Kanto, and there are other bug types you get to pick from. So I decided to go with Yanma, Ledian, and Scyther. Now, I was a little hesitant at first at giving him Ledian, but for two things. One, I like the idea of him having three bug flying types. I just think aesthetically that just is very appealing to me. But obviously, Ledian is an evolved Pokemon, so I was like, oh, it is probably will be a bit too strong to have on just a second gym leader. But no, in fact, Yanma, a single stage bug flying type, and Ledian have the exact same base stat total of, I think it's 395. So both of them have below 400 base stat total. And neither of them have any kind of move pool at all, period. Like, the best thing Ledian can use at level 15 is Comet Punch. Neither of them learn a single flying move, I believe, throughout their entire moveset in Generation 2. Like the best either of them can do is Yanma. If you like fudge it a little bit, Yanma, I think he learned Sonic Boom at level 17, but we'll give it to it just because otherwise it could only use Tackle, pretty much. So I think Yanma and Ledian, along with the Scyther in the back, I think that's reasonable. Because Lediba would definitely be way too weak. And I think Lediba and Spinarak together doesn't feel right with me. And you theoretically could argue, oh, he has Metapod and Kakuna because those Pokemon can be found in the national park bug catching contest. Well, if I were making this game, which I'm kind of in these, in the fixed column here, I'm under the assumption that I can make the games work how I would want them to work. And I personally would let Lediba and Yanma, especially Yanma, considering it's only a 1% encounter in the route right before the National Park, which is a pain to get. Uh, but yeah, I would make both of them available in the bug catching contest. So I think that shakes out good enough. Okay, moving on. Whitney, good team. I don't necessarily absolutely love the Clefairy. However, it didn't get hardly any love in Generation One. It seems to be ubiquitous with Whitney just as a concept. Like her gym is laid out in the shape of a Clefairy. They're both pink and round. Like the only other Pokemon I feel would really fit her is Jigglypuff, and that wouldn't help. Um, like there are a lot of good normal types in Generation One, but Snubbull just doesn't really seem to work with her. Stantler, I think, is doesn't really work. So with Girafarig, Teddy Ursa, just, I don't know. These just didn't seem to really mesh with her. So I'm gonna say this is a good first good and one of the only good teams in Johto. And I don't really think I could really improve it. I think her going back to only two after Bugsy had three is fine, especially since the Miltank is as strong as it is. Even in Generation Two, it being as fast as it is and as relatively strong as it is with Stomp, Milk Drink, Attract, Rollout. That's just a really good. It's a really good move set for that Pokemon. Morty. I mentioned him earlier. Gastly, Haunter, Gengar, Haunter. I don't know why he's coded like this, but for some reason he's coded to send his second Haunter out last. I don't know why. That's just how whenever you fight him, that is what he's programmed to do. I don't know why. So that's how it's expressed on the Bulbapedia article. But regardless, it is four Pokemon of the same evolutionary line. And as I said in the intro, I completely understand them having to do a ghost gym leader, since they're doing one of every gym leader possible outside of a dark gym leader. Um, but the way they did it is unacceptable. Not having Mischievous is unacceptable. One Haunter, Mischievous, Gengar, that would be fine. But two Haunters, a Ghastly and a Gengar with no Mischievous at all. What were you doing? Why was that Pokemon basically non-existent from the games? Period. So yeah, bad team, terrible. So I personally would fix it with having a Mischievous and a Gengar. It is only two Pokemon again. However, I'm bumping their levels way up to 27. I believe there were 20. Yeah, there were 25 before, but with only two Pokemon, both technically fully evolved in Generation Two, both being at 27, both acting as dual aces. I really like this personally. Um, I like the idea of them having a bunch of ghost types just to throw by you to confuse and curse and sleep you to death. That's a good idea in theory. However, this mischievous, I especially wanted it to be 27 so it could learn Psybeam. And I thought 28 was maybe a little too strong for just the fourth gym leader in this game. So both being 27, both having kind of unique ways to mess you up. Mischievous can knows Confuse Ray. It can confuse you even more with Psybeam. I think maybe it knows Pain Split at that point, but it they could just give it to it if they wanted to. And then Gengar keeps a similar set where it sleeps, puts you to sleep, and then Dream Eaters you to death, and you can't leave because of mean looks. I like that move set a lot. Um, Way better personally, I think, than the Ghastly, two Hunters, and a Gengar. Moving on, Chuck. In a way, I kind of appreciate them giving Primeape and Polygrass something to do, considering they weirdly were not on Bruno's team at all. Um, but it's still lacking either of the two Generation 2 fighting types. Obviously, Hitmontop is on Bruno's team in the Elite Four, but Heracross is on no one's team. It also should have been on Bruno's team, but regardless, I kind of fiddle with the idea of switching him from a fighting gym leader to a ground gym leader, especially since Giovanni is no longer a gym leader in Kanto and Gen 2. Either switching him to ground or switching Bruno to a ground gym leader. But outside of Donphan, all the other ground types are taken. Like Piloswine is on Price's team, Steelix is on Jasmine's team, Gligar is fine. Like I could see Donphan, Gligar, and some other ground type fitting here fine enough. But I did want something. I did want to put Heracross somewhere. Like he could be on Bruno's team, but for the purposes of this video right now, I'm just gonna say he is a bad team, and we're gonna give him a Heracross at level 32. Um, Again, if I still don't know if I'm necessarily like happy about this because Bruno is still going to be there in the Elite Four. I like him being the one that sticks around. I feel like Koga moving up and Bruno sticking around. That just for some reason feels right to me. Um, so maybe if I gave this even half a day's more thought, I would come back and agree with the idea of having Donphan, Gligar, and something else as his team instead. But at least as of right now, Heracross level 32, Polygraph 31, Primeape 30. And again, I want these levels to ramp up a little more than they do just to help with the level curve in general of Generation 2. And I would especially try to fix that by making it so that you cannot go east of Mahogany until you beat Jasmine. So there's no reason that Price could ever be the fifth gym leader. Chuck would have to be the fifth gym leader. So I think 32 is fine for the fifth gym leader of this game. Speaking of Jasmine, bad team. One of my least favorite teams of all time. Definitely my least favorite in Generation 2. Possibly one of my least favorite of all time. I understand that the idea was they wanted to emphasize that they changed Magnemite into a Steel type. I completely understand that. That is completely valid. You didn't have to give her two Magnemites. That is not necessary at all when there are several other Steel types they could have pulled from. So obviously, bad team. Terrible. Garbage team. What you do is you evolve one of those Magnemites into a Magneton, especially if you are going to keep Silver, your rival, having a Magnemite. I personally wouldn't. Again, maybe for a video for the future. But it's already on level 30. It's the 6th gym leader. You can give her a Magneton. Magneton, and then Skarmory, the Pokemon that a lot of people think comes from Gen 3, considering it's almost non-existent in Generation 2. It's a version exclusive, and then only on the route south of Blackthorn City, the very end of the game, and then no major trainers ever use one. So Jasmine spotlighting it here would at least allow people to remember that it exists. So, yeah, she should have always had a Skarmory, and then Steelix level 35. I think that's fine. Moving on. Price. Again, terrible team. Seal and Dugong. Reusing evolutionary lines when one of them isn't even an ice type, and there are several other ice types you could pick from. And Piloswine is on level 31. That's 4 levels weaker than Jasmine, but he's supposed to be the 7th gym leader. Like, if they had something where like you need to find some part from Mahogany. He's Mahogany. I've said I'm in Ekritique earlier when I meant you can't go east of Ekritique. You can't go each of Ekritik until you fight Jasmine. But if they had made it so that you had to get some kind of machine part for the lighthouse or something from Mahogany, forcing you to go through the entire rocket plotline or to get it or something, you know, essentially making Price the, you know, the fifth or sixth gym leader and then Jasmine the seventh, I would have been more fine with that. But the way it is right now, 31 is ridiculously low personally. So here's what I would do to fix it. Delibird, Dugong, Jinx, Piloswine at level 38. Um, I think I I didn't really want to give him Sneasel. I personally feel like your rival's Sneasel be the only one you see until you get to the Elite Four. Feels right to me personally. Um, and I just really like the idea of Delibird being on his team. You can, I can give or take Delibird being there, but I just wanted more Gen 4, or sorry, Gen 2 representation, along with Jinx, who evolves from a Gen 2 Pokemon, and also seventh gym leader. Maybe the seventh gym leader can have four Pokemon. I think that's fine. Um, yeah, level 38, especially after everything with the rocket plot line. I think that's fair. Moving on to Claire. This one I'm gonna give a meh face to because they had to make her a dragon gym leader. There had to be a dragon gym leader somewhere between the two regions. But there were no dragon types introduced in Gen 2. I don't know why. I don't know why they decided to have both a ghost and a dragon gym leader and then only introduce one new Pokemon of that, of that type each. So they basically had to do three Dragonair and a Kingdra. Again, I don't know why they didn't just add more dragon types, but that's whatever. So again, Mephace, not bad. They just were working with what they had, and because they had only dragon types, whatever. I decided to switch out to the Dragonair for a Gyarados, like in Heart Gold, and a Lapras. Lapras, is Serpentine. It blue along with the rest of her team. I feel like aesthetically, it fits. Um, and also, Kingdra is now level 45 because I personally believe like 45 is the absolute floor that any eighth gym leader should ever have. Obviously, you can go a lot higher than 45, but 45 just feels right for an eighth gym leader. And then by extension, the champion needs to be no less than 55. Again, probably a video for the future. But yeah, her being only level 40 just completely messes with the level curve to then force Lance to only be level 50 when he has multiple Dragonites that should be 55. But whatever, it's fine. Um, yeah, after Johto, 6 out of 8. Again, even though only two were where I would consider good or meh. That's honestly from memory more than I thought it would be. Honestly, I thought it would be not a sweep, and even then, technically speaking, per the rules, I could argue that you should give Whitney a snubble or something instead. But I'll be nice and say 6 out of 8. So currently, a total 11 out of 16. So over half so far. Moving over to Hoenn. First up, Roxanne. I gave this one a meh. Geodude and Nose Pass. That's about all you can really do. The only other rock types introduced in Generation 3 are Aeron and the fossils. And neither of those really felt like a good pick for her at this point for the first gym leader. So Geodude and Nose Pass, that's that's about all you can really do again. Because I really do feel like Aeron just I don't know. I don't like the idea of your grass starter not being able to be super effective against both her Pokemon. So not really anything I can do to fix it. So moving on to Brawly. I've never liked Brawly's Ruby and Sapphire team. I don't like just this will be a common theme throughout this video. I do not at all like just how often Machop shows up on basically every single fighting type gym leader. Either someone in the Machop line shows up in every single fighting type gym leader, more or less. And more often than not, actually, I think every single time, there are other fighting types that could pull from. So I'm going to say he has a bad team. Like you already have, outside of Chuck, Chuck is the one that doesn't have a Machoke. Although, ironically, they gave him a Machoke in the anime, so that's whatever. But in Generation 2, you still did fight Bruno in the Elite Four. So you still fight Machamp in two different games, and then again in this one. So, easy fix. You swap it out for a Meditite. I brought level 17 because from memory, I think it learns hidden power on level 17, but if it doesn't, yeah, even if it doesn't, you can just say it learns that's a TM. I think it'll be kind of fun if it has the hidden power fighting, just to have it, a fairly strong hidden power fighting, just to give it another, to have another fighting type move on the team. Because as fun as it is for his Emerald Meditite to have Focus Punch, it's very easy to cheese that Meditite. So yeah, Meditite level 17, Makuhita 18. Watson. Watson is my least favorite gym leader team of all time. Period. I despise this team specifically so much because, again, like I said with Jasmine, you fight a lot of Magnemite. That'll also crop up a couple more times over this video, but Magnemite is one of those Pokemon they just kind of throw on electric gym leader. Just it's kind of like Machoke or someone in the Haunter line where they just throw it on. That respective team if they just can't think of anything else to do. But for here, even though Electrike, Plusle, and Minun, I think that's it. But regardless, you have other options in Hoenn. I would have even been more or less fine with with Electrike, Voltorb, Magneton, because at least then there's a Generation 3 Pokemon on this team, but instead there is 0. So yeah, bad team. Switch Magneton out for Manectric. I know it's an underleveled Manectric, but Magneton was too, so it's fine. Moving on, Flannery. I kind of like Slugma getting some kind of spotlight, considering it got absolutely no representation at all outside of Magcargo on Blaine's team in the Kanto part of Johto, but you couldn't even find Slugma in the wild until you got to Kanto. So I like the idea of Slugma being on her team a lot, mostly because there aren't very many other options outside of Numble. I legitimately think if you wanted to give her a secondary ace, that had to be a Gen 3 Pokemon. It either have to be other than Torkoal, it would have to be either Blaziken or Camerupt. So But regardless, two Slugmas, bad. I I don't know why they just didn't give her Nummel. I know you do fight a lot of Nummels in Ruby and Sapphire, or at least Ruby specifically, uh, considering Team Magma, but Slugma, Nummel, Torkoal, that's what her team always should have been, and that's the one thing they decided to tweak team wise in Omega Ruby F Sapphire. I kind of wish they had done more, but whatever. Moving on to your dad, Norman. I like the idea of this team, but there are a lot of really cool normal types in Generation 3. You fight, many of them on your way up to him in those different rooms, which is a really cool concept. But I just wish that his team had a bit more variety to it. Two Slackings and a Vigoroth, I think is bad, and like maybe that's kind of the point, but I don't like that point. So I'm switching it to Vigoroth, Zangoose, Slacking. I think you can get away with boosting Slacking up to level 32, and then Vigoroth and Zangoose both being level 31. Mostly just because Zangoose learned Crush Claw on level 31. But in Ruby and Sapphire, his Slacking is level 31, but I wanted Zangoose to be 31, so I bumped up Slacking to 32, and I think that's fine. Especially since in my version of this game, you would have another rival fight on your way back into Petalburg. So that would give you more of a reason to train up at least a little bit before going to fight Norman. One extra level, I think is fine. Next up, Winona. She might have one of my all-time favorite gym leader teams. I really, really like how she has 4 Pokemon and all of them have different types: normal, water, steel, dragon. Like arguably you could say get rid of Skarmory instead, put in Tropius or something, but I like her bird aesthetic. But in theory, in when Ruby and Sapphire came out, Skarmory wasn't really a Johto Pokemon. Like I said before, people didn't even really know it was a Johto Pokemon. They thought it came from Hoenn. So her having Skarmory doesn't feel out of place here. So I'll say it's a really, really good team. I even like how they kept that all their different Pokemon having different secondary types, even in Emerald, with adding Swablu and Tropius instead of Swellow. So that's cool. The only thing I would change is upping the levels just a little bit, to have Altaria be level 35. I just think that progression feels better than only being 2 levels higher than the previous gym leader, especially with everything you go through between Petalburg and Fortree. I think 35 feels right. Tate and Liza. It's a good team. I like, obviously, the intentionality with Solrock and Lunatone being pairs. It was really good in Ruby and Sapphire. In Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, just Solrock and Lunatone was not cutting it anymore. There have been so many advances in just mechanics wise, move wise, that made it so that just having a Solrock and a Lunatone was not good for that point in the game. You had access to Mega Evolutions, you had access to way stronger grass, steel, water, ghosts. Like you had just dark, especially a lot of way stronger moves that could pretty easily one-shot them just instantaneously. So for Ruby and Sapphire, it's a good team. I just wish they had kept their Emerald team for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. But if I were making this team, I would keep Solrock and Lunatone level 42 and add Claydol and Chimecho. Chimecho get almost no love in this entire game. It's not very good, but I still feel like with Zatu being the ace of will in Gen 2, something I would change. Again, future video. I've never really loved them having a Zatu, but I did like that it was a flying type, so I wanted to keep that with Chimecho having levitate. So, Soul Rock or potentially Soul Rock, but it definitely Claydol can still fire off earthquakes, you know, as much as it likes without hurting any of his partners. So yeah, that's Tate Liza's team. Moving on, Wallace, I feel has a good team. Technically speaking, it's fine. There are a lot of water types that you could have substitute Seaking for, but it's just 1 out of 5. And Seaking specifically, what hasn't been on any other major teams up to that point. So I'm more or less fine. I'm going to call this a good team. However, it can definitely be greatly improved. And the only real improvement I'm going to make for this team, because I have a even bigger improvement for Wallace, or for Juan in just a second. But the only improvement I'm going to make here is switching out the Celio for a Starmie. Now, this is going to be making it so that there are now 2 previous gen Pokemon, one of them being the ace of previous gen Pokemon. However, 2 things on that. One, I never liked him with Celio. Celio being the Celio line being most of Glacier's team, and then him also having a Celio just never really worked for me. It never really worked aesthetically. Like, he really embodies beauty and he uses these Pokemon in contests, and Celio just doesn't really look like a contest Pokemon. So, whereas Starmie, I feel, does. I just feel like it just radiates this beauty that Wallace would use over a Celio. And I bumped all the levels up just a little bit to now have my loading be level 46 for 2 reasons. One, that matches Juan's level from Emerald, and I think 46 is just a good level for that point in the game. And if you're, again, like I said before, if you're hardcore nuzlocking these games, going from Tate and Liza at 42 directly into Wallace at 43, even though there's a whole, evil team subplot in between, you kind of have to underlevel going into Tate and Liza. Although, like I said, it's not the biggest deal because they're not the strongest gym leaders. But 46, I personally feel, makes more sense. It also bridges the gap a little bit between him and Sydney's ace levels. Moving on to Juan, I really, really do not like his team. For starters, 4 out of 5 of his Pokemon are used by members of the Gen 3 Elite Four. Whiscash is on Wallace's team. Celio is on, 2 Celios are on Glace's team. Kingdra is on Drake's team. Crawdon is on Sydney's team. And then Love Disc was on Wallace's team. So his team has absolutely zero originality to it, on top of him just having the same ace as the previous generation's 8th gym leader's ace Pokemon. I just never really felt like Kingdra fit him in the slightest. So I am going to go with saying he has a bad team. I feel like it was just a little lazy to give him 2 of the same Pokemon that Wallace had, Crawdon, and then also give Sydney a Crawdon. Actually, 3 of the same Pokemon that Wallace had with Love Disc as well. And then Kingdra being Claire's ace. It just always has rubbed me the wrong way. So I'm going to say bad team. Here's how I would fix it. And I am very proud of myself for this change. I'm changing it to Relicanth, Lantern, Gorbis, Huntail, Wailord. And This team specifically is comprised entirely of Pokemon associated with diving. Wailord, I believe, was the only Pokemon in Generation 3 that could learn Dive by level up. And then the other four are the only four Pokemon you can find when diving. I think that's really cool. You would have to kind of change the one's lore a little bit to make him more of a diver, but in my Pokemon game, I would do that. And not to mention, this is a fun little nod um, to the relic to the Reggie puzzle, where you have to have Relicanth in the beginning of your party and Wailord at the back of your party. I think that's neat personally. Um, it is a little awkward with him having a Wailord and then Wallace having a Wailord in as champion. You can get around that by either having just be this team, just have one and not Wallace as a champion, or just rationalize it by saying, "Oh, it's actually kind of cool that like Juan's mentor Wallace has Juan's ace as his opener." I think that's it's a fun connection. But regardless, I think this is just a very good team, and I really like the intentionality I came up with for it. So, running total so far, Hoenn 5 out of 9, including Wallace and Juan, making so far we have 16 out of 25. So we're still more than half at this point in the video. All right, moving on to Sinnoh. First up, Rourke. I personally have never liked the idea of him having Brock's team plus Cranidos. I like him having an Onyx as a reference to his dad Byron having a Steelix. I like that, and I like both Geodude and Onyx being the Pokemon found in the mine that he works at. So again, I'm giving this one a meh because of the intentionality with them both being Pokemon that he works with on the daily basis. So I'm more or less fine with that. However, I personally would give him a Bonsly. It's the only other rock type in Generation 4, I believe, that's new to Generation 4. Um, I don't know if it really fits his minor aesthetic. However, I just personally feel like it is this new Pokemon that it's pre-evolution from a Generation 2 Pokemon. I just feel like it deserves to be on somewhere, on some significant team, especially since Geodude is used very often by even the previous gen's first gym leader. Switching out for Bonsly makes sense to me personally. And I'm also keeping the Onyx just to kind of keep that parallel with his dad having a Steelix, and then Cranidos. I don't know exactly if I love this idea, but I wanted Bonsly to be level 14 because that's the level it learns Rock Throw on. However, Bonsly is kind of deceptively strong. I believe it has 80 defense and actually pretty decent special defense and attack. It is really slow and has very low HP, so it'll still go down, fairly fast with super effective hits. And then obviously the Onyx is more or less dead weight. Any water or ground, water or grass move will just wipe it out immediately. And the Cranidos being level 15, like it is in Platinum, I think. But regardless, 15, I don't think is too crazy for a first gym leader. Moving on. Gardenia. Solid team. I don't personally love the idea of her having a Turtwig. If you can get around it, I would rather gym leaders not have starters. And also, this is going to be something that I'm going to do for a couple of entries here. I excuse me. I really like Cynthia's team. I really like her Platinum Cynthia's team, where every single Pokemon, even though every single Pokemon, uh, they all have different types. In Platinum, no two types among any of our Pokemon overlap. I think it's 11 types total. It didn't happen in Diamond and Pearl since Gastrodon obviously overlapped with both Milotic and Garchomp, but in Platinum, that felt very intentional. In order to keep that, they had to give her a lot of Pokemon, at least two different Pokemon that were aces of other gym leader Pokemon. And if possible, I'm going to try to remove that ace from the gym leader so they can stay unique to Cynthia. In order to do this, she has a good team. Solid, very solid team. Obviously, there's other things you could give her, but even then, there's not really that many other options, especially ones that are from Gen 4, like Wormadam. It's not really, I don't really know if that's gym leader material. So what I would do is you make her have Cherubi, Roselia, and Leafeon. Obviously, Roselia evolves into Roserade, but at least then the Pokemon itself won't overlap. I kind of fiddle with the idea of keeping her with the Cherim like she has in Platinum, but I think Cherubi is fine. Especially since Roselia is stat wise pretty significantly stronger than Turtwig, and then Leafeon is an evolution, so it has pretty incredible stats, especially for that point in the game. So yeah, I like her with Roserade, but just for the purposes of my personal headcanon, this is the team that I would give her in order to keep Gardine or keep Roserade with Cynthia. Kind of on a similar note, Maylene. Again, there's Machoke. Never don't like that every single fighting type gym leader has a Machoke. So kind of my brain was going two different ways with this. First, like I said, I would have preferred Cynthia's Lucario being hers, especially since aesthetically she looks like Lucario. Not as much as like I would even argue that what's that guy's name? The guy Iron Island. Not as much as Riley. Yeah, not as much as Riley does, but like she aesthetically is supposed to look, at least resemble Lucario. So I kind of fiddle with the idea of keeping Turtwig on Gardenia's team and giving her Krogunk, Monferno, and Lucario, and then also giving Crasher Wake up Prinplup, so that way you have the fire, water, and grass starter, or fire, grass, water starter. Nope, grass. Sorry, grass, fire, water starter. That they're in a row, like one per gym leader. But I decided against that. I decided she does in fact have a bad team. I don't like her having Machoke and Meditite, especially since I said Krogunk is available. However, Krogunk is very prominent on the villain teams kind of throughout, so it wouldn't really feel unique to her. So I decided to go crazy with it. I decided to change her into Normine. She's now a normal type gym leader. Yeah. Obviously in Diamond and Pearl, Lopunny and Ambipom did get use other places where they should not have been. So I'm going to fix this using the Platinum decks. That is how I'm going to be in this perfect world I'm creating. They had access to the Platinum Pokemon from the jump. So Lopunny at 31, Lickitung at 30, and then Ambipom at 32. I don't think that's too strong for the third gym leader. Like Lopunny has a fairly high base stat total, but it doesn't really hit very hard. His abilities aren't really that great. And then I feel like Ambipom just felt like ace material for somebody instead it was randomly thrown on Volkner's team. And then Lickitung's there because it can evolve into a Sinnoh Pokemon. Next up, Crasher Wake. Now, Crasher Wake, I kind of have issues with for two reasons. One, I really don't understand why they decided to make both Crasher Wake and Maylene both kind of the third or fourth gym leader, depending on where you go. Um, I much prefer the way Platinum did it, where you fight Maylene, then Crasher Wake. So because of that, they had to limit the levels of both of them down to 30. However, I kind of wish they had done it like they did in Gen 1, where they made them both a little stronger, like both on like 33 or something like that. But regardless, he was on level 30, and he has two Pokemon that are previous gen Pokemon, just like Maylene, actually. However, I gave him a meh because Gyarados absolutely fits his aesthetic. I am perfectly fine with Gyarados being on his team. It just feels right. And also, Gyarados doesn't really get to be on a lot of water focused teams. So I'm okay with that. And Quagsire can be found in the Great Marsh, which is in the town that he lives in. So I'm going to give this team a pass. However, the team I would give him would be Gyarados, East Form, Gastrodon, and a level 35 Floatzel. I think 3 levels above Maylene makes sense for the actual fourth gym leader. And then that Gastrodon can be found just east of Pastoria, so that makes sense to me. Fantina, great team. Like I said before, I don't love Gengar being everywhere. Even more of a problem in Generation 2, where you have, Morty having 4 of that team, Silver having a Gengar for some reason, and then also Karen having one. That's too much Gengar. But at least there was no Gengar in Generation 2. And I like the idea of all 3 of them having some way to levitate. Obviously, Drifblim is flying type, and the other 2 in Generation 4 had the ability to levitate. So I really like that. I didn't like how they made Gengar stronger than the Drifblim and then made Gengar her ace in the rematch. That was weird. But regardless, as a team as it is, it's very solid. However, I personally would switch Gengar out for Dusclops. Dusclops evolves into Dust Noir, later on, so I think her having one makes sense. I am kind of breaking a rule I established earlier, and I forgot about this. How I would prefer, waiting 2 generations to use an eighth of a previous gen Pokemon. So maybe if I had, give this another Passover, I would have potentially switched Dusclops out for somebody since Phoebe has one. But since Dusclops did get special, did get an evolution, special privilege in this generation, I think I'm okay with it. But Drifloon being level 36, Dusclops 35, and then we're bumping Miss Magius up to level 38. Moving on, Byron. So a little thing here. The program I was using didn't have every single gym leader icon available. I think this technically would have come out first with Watson. I think I had to use Lieutenant Surge there instead. But there it was fine because he basically was a Gen 1 gym leader anyway. But if ever that comes up in the future, I'll just put a gym leader or other major trainer that has the same type as them. So the program I was using didn't have Byron, so I had to use Molayne because, why not? But in Diamond and Pearl, Byron had a Bronzor, Steelix, Bastiodon. Solid team. Bronzor and Steelix can both be found in Iron Island, where he lives. And obviously, the other fossil to kind of mirror Rorik's team, along with Steelix evolving from Onyx that he had. So solid team. I don't love that Bronzor are everywhere in Generation 4, but it is what it is. But because of that, I actually decided to give him a Probo Pass. That's kind of flipping back and forth about if I felt like Probo Pass was more of a Byron Pokemon or more of a Rourke Pokemon. I know in the rematches in Platinum, Rourke had it, but there are other rock types he could pull from, and there aren't as many steel types, especially ones unique to Generation 4. So I personally felt like uh, Byron having Promo Pass worked for him. Promo Pass Steelix and then level 42 Bastiodon to match. I believe that was the level that he had. Either 41 or 42 was the level it was in Platinum, and that felt right. Candace. Wow. Okay. So this is the first instance of a Generation 4 trainer randomly having a Pokemon that is not of their type. And they had to do this because they decided to kneecap their own Pokedex for some reason and not allow half of the new Pokemon introduced in the regular decks. So because of that, they had to have both duplicates in Snover and Abomasnow and Medicham, on top of Sneasel, who, is prominently on Cyrus's team. So there's just a lot wrong with this team. Obviously, bad. In a perfect world, she would have had access to the Platinum deck from the start. But regardless, the team I came up with was Abomasnow, Piloswine, Frostlass, and Glaceon. I I went back and forth about whether or not I wanted Piloswine on this team. Um, Maybe three different Pokemon, all with Snowcloak, making use of almost knows weather. Maybe that's a bit much. I'm not exactly sure. Um, it does evolve into a Generation 4 Pokemon, so I wanted to spotlight that. But, you know, I could take it or leave it. Doesn't really matter. The important thing is Abomasnow, Glaceon, and Frostlass. I've always, for some reason in my head, I always pictured her as having Glaceon as her ace. I know it is in the Platinum rematch. And again, I like that they both take advantage of Abomasnow's hail. So yeah, that's again, I could give her take or leave Piloswine, but Glaceon level 45. Again, I like how I'm ramping this up a little faster than they were in Platinum. Moving on, Volkner, another prime example of where they were basically forced to give him Pokemon that are not of his type. He could have been Pachirisu, but Pachirisu is very weak. I don't know if I love that being on his team. At least Ambipom can learn Shockwave. I'm not certain if Octillery can. I think it can learn Zap Cannon by Egg Move or something, but I don't even know if it knew that. At least Octillery hasn't been used on any other major teams, so at least there's that. But regardless, he has two Pokemon that are not electric. It's a bad team. It just is a bad team. They did good enough for what they had to work with, but obviously his platinum team of Raichu, Jolteon, Luxray, Electivire being level 50 in that game, that is correct. I think level 50 to then bridge the gap between that and the levels of the Elite Four and Diamond and Pearl, with Aaron being level 57. I think with that entire route and then Victory Road, I think that's a decent jump as opposed to in Diamond and Pearl where Luxray with 49 jumping up 8 levels, I think was a bit much. But 7 feels more reasonable to me. So, after going through all the Sinnoh ones, surprisingly, again, in my head, I always kind of remember Diamond and Pearl having just vast array of terrible teams, mostly because I really only think of Candace and Volkner. I guess more recency bias since they're both, towards the end of the journey, and also Flynn doesn't help with that either. But from my determinations, I say only 3 out of 8 are actually bad, giving a running total of 19 out of 33. Moving on to Unova. First, we have Silent, Chili, and Cress. They somehow didn't have a picture of any of them, so I had to go with this alt version of Charon. Them having a Lillipup, and then one of the monkeys, the one that is strong against your starter Pokemon. I really dig that. I kind of floated the idea of them just being Grass, Fire, and Water Elite Four members. Like there are, but I didn't really want to give Darumaka to Cress or Chili. Yeah, to Chili. I feel like it may be a little too strong, especially when compared to like Petalil and Time Pole or whoever, whatever weak grass and water type. So I think one Pokemon being consistent and then the ace switching, I do like that. So I'm gonna say that's good. Lenora. Um I don't hate her team. Watchog is annoying with how fast it is. It can hit you really fast and hard with Retaliate and then put you to sleep with Hypnosis. But Watchog is a Pokemon that is found a lot on Team Plasma Pokemon, or on Team Plasma teams, and it just doesn't really scream ace potential to me personally. I said it was good because in hindsight, maybe I would put nah at this point, but especially with Herdier just being the evolved form of of Lillipup from the previous gym, but it's definitely not bad. They are 2 normal types of this region. That's not really going to be a problem in this region because there are no previous gen Pokemon available in this game. But I don't love Watchog being Lenore's ace. It just never really felt right to me. Who does feel right personally is Bouffalant. I've just always felt like Bouffalant fit her aesthetically very well. You can keep Herdier, I can give or take that, doesn't really matter. But Bouffalant being level 20, it's very slow, but it is very bulky. There are other second gym Pokemon that have a higher base stat total, but I don't know if there are any others that are necessarily as bulky as Bouffalant. But there are fighting types you can catch in the routes nearby with enough time and effort. I think you could just eventually get around it. Berg, another very solid team. Whirlipede, Dwebble, Leaveney, good. I would maybe up the levels slightly to like 24 or 25, but as far as the team itself, very good. I don't really have any major notes there. Elisa, the first team I would consider bad. I like the idea of Emolga, volt switching into Emolga just to keep volt switching like that, continuously dodging your ground moves. Like if she does volt switch into Zebstrika, she would then volt outspeed and like volt switch back into Emolga to dodge your bulldoze or dodge whatever other ground move you have. I like the idea of that, but there's Joltik who could at least not take super effective damage from ground moves, or Electric, who also has Levitate, which could also effectively use that same strategy. And also level them up just 1 level. I think the striker evolves on 28, so I just bumped them up one level to be 28 and then 26 for the other 2. They can still do that volt switching shenanigans, although Electric isn't nearly as fast. However, it functionally has no weaknesses since it is an electric type that has Levitate. So you're probably not going to be able to one shot it, and it can still switch out. Clay, again, a very solid team. Um, I don't really have any notes. It's a very good team, especially for that point in the game. Um, yeah, the only thing I would do is bump up the levels just a little bit, just to kind of ramp up in order to make by the end the gym leaders are at least 45 or higher. Um, I feel like 33 isn't too strong for this point in the game. Skyla, this is a technically fine team. There's no repeats. It's fine. Like it's there's nothing objectively wrong with it, so I have to give it a good. However, I really don't like Unfezant. You fight a lot of those throughout the game. There's one, I think, Charon's team. Subat and Swanna are fine, although Swanna just never really screamed ace material to me, similar to Watchhog. So I would personally fix it by taking away Unfezant and making Braviary her ace at level 38. So it's Subat and Swanna 36, and then Braviary 38. Braviary feels like a Pokemon she would have personally. It would be way under leveled, and that might be why they didn't do it. But I can get over it. Other gym leaders, other gym leaders have always had aces that are under leveled, and they will continue to do that till the end of time. So level 38 Braviary is fine with me. Bryson. Again, nothing objectively wrong with this team. I just think a lot of ice type teams are kind of boring, especially after this gen where nearly every single ice type trainer will either have Cryogonal and or Beartic. So just kind of by association with other teams. I don't know exactly what I would do to fix that. Maybe I would make Vanilux his ace, like bump the levels up a little bit, and make Vanilux his ace. But there's nothing wrong with this team. It is the three ice types you have to work with. The only thing I'd really do is bump up the levels and make his Beartic level 41. So next up, Drayden / Iris, depending on the game you're in. This is one of the only other few bad teams in Unova for a couple of reasons. First reason, Zweilous is right there. You didn't have to double dip with Fracture and then also Haxorus. Could have had a Zweilous. It would be underleveled, but so is the Haxorus. And two, you are the 8th gym leader, and you are carrying only 3 Pokemon. That is unacceptable. I personally believe that the 8th gym leader should have at least 4 Pokemon. The seventh can get away with 4, but at least 3, usually 4. But the 8th gym leader here only having 3 Pokemon, that's wild, especially with one of them being not fully evolved. I really don't like that at all. So I'm switching it around to having 4 Pokemon, keeping the Fracture because you have no choice. These are all the dragon types in the region. You're adding an underleveled Zweilous, keeping Druddigon, and then Haxorus now at level 45. Again, 45 is the absolute floor for any 8th gym leader. So, yeah, that's it for Black and White. However, I did want to go over the gym leaders introduced in Black and White too. First off, Terran, terrible. I hate this team. I do not like this team in the slightest. A couple of reasons. One, Lillipup is not ace material in the slightest. It's actually kind of like weirdly tricky to take out. I think his might have like IVs that are like a lot higher than most first gym leaders have because it is such a weak Pokemon. However, it is not unique to him in the slightest. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the gym trainers you fight going up to him, You fight one that has a Patrat and one that has a Lillipup, and then you fight him with a Lillipup and a Patrat. Um, it's also just the reverse of Lenora's team, just the pre-evolved versions of them. And not to mention, Bianca was the one that had Stoutland on the rival teams in black and white, so I don't know why he has Lillipup. It just, nothing about this feels like he earned the gym leader status with this team. So even though technically there's nothing objectively wrong with it, I personally have enough issues with it to say it is a bad team. Game Freak could have made a better team. And the better team I would have made is this here: Pidove and Minccino. Now, Pidove would actually go along with his rival team because he's the one with the Moon Pheasant. And then Minccino, a Pokemon that is outside of the professor showing you one at the beginning of the game in black and white. No other major trainers, as far as I know, have Minccino or Cinccino. So this feels way more unique, especially for that point in the game. P-Dub is obviously everywhere, but Minccino, I'd be very confident saying no trainers, period. You can't even find them in the wild. I don't even think you'd be able to see a Minccino up until this point. So that is what I would do. And then him being level 14. Roxy, I like Roxy a lot. I like taking Whirlipede away from Berg and giving it to her. I honestly think Berg's team in black and white too, if I were doing it wholesale, that would now be a bad team since they had a Swadloon. But Roxy having Whirlipede is fine. Coughing is not. Coughing is one of those Pokemon that they just kind of throw on if they don't really know what else to give a poison person. And especially since there is at least one other poison type they could have given her. Even in her challenge mode team, she has Coughing and Grimer. Again, doesn't work for me. So I'm personally saying this is a bad team. I think Game Freak could have done better giving her a Trubbish. And I forgot to do levels, but I'm pretty sure I would have done 16, 18. That feels right. And last but not least, Marlin. Now, this is a team that I personally feel can kind of get away with only being 3 Pokemon. I still much prefer it at 4. It is the 8th gym leader. So because of that, I insist that he should have 4. However, with the ace being level 51 and they're all fully evolved, they're all very strong, I think I'll consider this a good team. I like his challenge mode team with a Mantine, at least running it up to 4 Pokemon. However, I personally would take out Wailord and instead add Alola Mola. And then it is actually kind of crazy to me that he didn't originally have Seismitoad, considering that his gym puzzle is you hopping around on lily pads. That just screams the frog Pokemon to me. But apparently I guess because they kept Palpitoad on Clay's team, they didn't want to overlap. I kind of understand that, although they still gave, they still at least gave the Dark Elite 4 member Crocodile. I guess they did, whatever. But regardless, in my perfect world, it would work out fine enough to give him Seismitoad as his ace. Okay, so taking everything from Nova into account, there's actually only 4 out of 11 that I personally consider bad teams. So that's pretty good, although a lot of that is helped by the fact that there were no opportunities to use previous gen Pokemon. They took that option away from them, and one of those was from the Black and White 2 gym leader options where she did have the opportunity to have a previous gen Pokemon. So Take that for what you will. We're now at 23 out of 44. So we're really close to getting below half. So that's something. We're 5 gens in, and we're still barely over, we're just now over half. Kalos. Um, I have ranted and raved a lot on this channel about how much I don't like just most things about these games. The gym leaders being one of the major factors of why I personally just do not like these games. But first, Viola, solid team. I think level 12 is the absolute floor any first gym should be at. Um, I would maybe even raise it up to 14, maybe, but 12 is fine. And then Surskit, she had no other options. The only other bug types she could have had on her team that are native to Kalos are also in the same line as Vivian. So she had no choice. Um, Vivian, for some reason, was the only bug type introduced. So Surskit, sure, why not? It evolves into a bug flying type. If I were to make a whole team, I would try to give her all bug flying types, if possible. If not, I would at least fill it with as many bug flying types as I could. Uh, just feel like, kind of like Bugsy. It just feels right for her to have those. But yeah, Surskit's fun. It's not weak to fire, so in her only having 2 Pokemon, I think that's fine. So solid. Grant, again, objectively amazing team. Kind of like with Erica, I like how they gave him 2 Pokemon that are both on the same level. Basically, dual aces. You can maybe argue that Tyrant is more of his ace since it's second, but you know, I really like how he has both fossils and they're both his ace. Like the only other really rock types you could add are Binacle, maybe. I can't think of any others, but I don't really feel like Binacle really fits him. So solid second gem. Karina. I really, really do not like her team for several reasons. First, Machoke did not need to bring Machoke back. There is at least one other fighting type you could have pulled from Gen 6 that easily could have replaced Machoke. Second major reason, and I didn't even realize this until I was playing through X and Y kind of recently. There is a trainer in Reflection Cave, which is a cave on the route going towards the city that Karina is the gym leader of. In the Reflection Cave, there is a battle girl that has a throw and a Halucha. Meaning that by the time you get to Karina, Halucha is no longer special. If that trainer came after and a route after this gym, I would be more okay with that. But because you fight Halucha as just a random trainer before it is her ace, that really rubs me the wrong way. I like Mienfu. I don't think there's any trainers that have just Mienfu. Obviously, Mian Xiao was at least the ace of Marshall in Black and White, and then it was also on his team Black and White too. But I like just having Mienfu is fine. I believe there's only one other fighting type outside of Chestnut she could have had, so I'm fine with that. But her having Machoke, which again I felt was a very lazy choice, just because they throw Machoke on everything, and Halucha not being special to Karina, I'm saying it's a bad team. And I personally would still keep Halucha, but then add Pangoro. I really like Pangoro. It is one of my favorite Generation 6 Pokemon. It's a shame that it wasn't on this team. It's on no one's team as far as I remember. Um, and yeah, you can keep Mienfu, but you can have Halucha be level 31, kind of again as a secondary ace, and then Pangoro level 32. Ramos. Ramos begins the trend of Gen 6 gym leaders having their ace be from Kalos and then two other Pokemon who are not from Kalos. So, spoilers, almost every other gym leader for the rest of this region will be considered bad teams because they made a choice to specifically not highlight the Pokemon that are in Kalos. And Weepinbell is a Pokemon that was, highlighted on Erica's team from Yellow. So it's not like it was really hurting for the spotlight. Jumpluff, the only other major trainer it was on, is technically a post game fight with Erica in Gold and Silver. So I'm fine with him having Jumpluff. And I didn't really feel like Trevenant really fit his team. But Weepinbell, I just don't really understand that choice. So I personally feel like it's a bad team. So I switched Weepinbell out for Gourgeist. I don't really care which Gourgeist it is. I like the idea of Gourgeist having multiple forms, but just for the sake of simplicity, we'll just say it's the average one. Again, it doesn't really matter. Uh, but I especially like Gourgeist because unlike Weepinbell, where like it's like kind of gourd shaped. It's definitely not a really a plant that you would normally find in a garden, and he definitely has a gardener aesthetic, whereas pumpkins are. So I feel like it just fits him better. Whereas Trevenant, again, I really just did not feel like it did. Moving on, Clement. Um, I don't know why Emilg is here. I legitimately have zero idea why they picked Emolga over Dedenne. Um, and, and like Magneton, again, they just kind of throw it on to teams when they don't really know what else to give them. It fits his aesthetic, I guess, but I don't love it. But especially because uh, they have Emolga instead of Dedenne, I'm going to say this is a bad team. Just like Dedenne, I think is probably the only other electric type they could have used, but regardless, not having it at all, even if it was Emolga and Dedenne, I'd even be more fine with that. But yeah, at least having Dedenne, Magneton, and Heliolisk is at least better. So moving on, Valerie. Now Valerie is, I think, the one Generation 6 gym leader in this portion of the game that I genuinely am okay with how they did it. So, just like the idea they had with Jasmine, where they really wanted to highlight Magnemite now having the steel typing, I liked how the two Pokemon they picked are Pokemon that highlight how previous gen Pokemon can now have the fairy typing. I maybe would have switched out Mr. Mime for a Azumarill just because the next gym is psychic. Um, it doesn't matter too much. I like how, in this case, Mr. Mime is seen more as a fairy as opposed to psychic like it usually is. But, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that like it doesn't bother me nearly as much that there are two previous gen Pokemon because the intentionality of them specifically being Pokemon that weren't fairy but now are. That's the point of them. So I'm gonna say that's good. Again, the only thing I would maybe change is switch out Mr. Mime, but for Azumarill, maybe even make Mawile Mega. I don't know. Mawil's just kind of dead weight. Like I like Mawile, but it's really not very good. Um, but regardless, nothing I would really feel confident changing. So Valerie is actually a good gym leader. Olympia, I do not like. Again, Olympia's character portrait wasn't available, so I had to give Sabrina. Um, and the main reason I don't like her is not only are there two previous gen Slucky types when there is at least one other option. Meowstic is a Pokemon you fight a lot throughout the region. Your rival, I think you average one fight per new city against your rival. I could be wrong about that. It could be that you fight your other rivals more often than I remember. But I remember being kind of annoyed by the end of it because of just how often you fight uh, your main, was it Selena or Caleb, depending on who you pick. Um, and they have Meowstic, and then Olympia also has Meowstic. It also just doesn't scream ace material to me. I just don't. It just doesn't do it for me. So because of all of that, I'm gonna say it's a bad team. It's unoriginal. It has previous gen Pokemon where it doesn't need it, and I think they could have done better. And I think because this is the seventh gym leader and the levels are already ramping up pretty high, I think you keep the three Pokemon that were on our team, Sigilif, Slowking, Meowstic, and then add Malamar at level 48. Um, Malamar is used some on the villain teams, but as far as like major trainers, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it's on any of like the named uh, admin teams. I could be wrong about that, but you could just fix that by not fighting them until after you fight Olympia. Plus, I feel like it's kind of fun seeing Malamar as a more of a psychic type as opposed to a dark type. Um, it being on the villain team implies darkness, whereas here it's focusing on a psychic typing. So that's just kind of where my head was at there. Last but not least, probably one of the most disappointing gym leaders of all time, Wolfric. You are the eighth gym leader. You are the strongest a gym leader has ever been and still has ever been. Level 59 is the highest eighth gym. That's stronger than a lot of Elite Four members, even some champions. Yet you only have three Pokemon. You have an Abomasnow, but it's not a Mega. Why? This far into the game, Megas should be everywhere. Every available. I genuinely believe that even Olympia could have gotten away with having one, but especially after you fight, after you're done with the Team Flare storyline, every other major trainer should have a Mega Stone. But Abomasnow definitely should be his Mega. Cryogonal, I just don't feel like it really fits him all that well. And I don't remember if there are any other ice types that you really, really could have pulled from necessarily. But not that it really matters because it's, again, not having a Mega, only having three Pokemon. I think that makes it him. I personally feel that makes them have a bad team. So I would switch it out for Mega Abomasnow, basically as a pseudo ace, level 58. Vanillux, Mamoswine. He just looks like a guy that would have a Mamoswine. And then Avalux at level 58. I just feel like in order for him to really capture the essence of being the strongest gym leader ever, him having at least four Pokemon. I kind of toy with the idea of him keeping the Cryogonal or putting a Beartic or some other ice type available on there, but I think these four Pokemon are just scream power to me and also just seem to fit his aesthetic. And again, Mega Abomasnow was a must and they just didn't do it. Not that Mega Abomasnow is even like really that great. I've ranted before about how I really do not like the stat distribution on Abomasnow. They made it slower and then distributed the rest of the stats evenly between defenses and the attacks to make him overall like just kind of okay. But regardless, it's better than regular Abomasnow. So for Kalos, that's 5 out of 8. Again, from memory, I would have thought it's actually higher than that. Um, I've come around to appreciating Valerie's team a lot more. There are other fairy types she could have pulled from, Slurpuff, Aromatisse, but the intentionality of having those two spotlighting previous gen Pokemon that are now fairy, I think is fine. And then they started off strong with the first two being good, but then the pattern of having two previous gen and then the ace being of this region just that did not work for me. So now we're 6 gens in, and we have a total of 28 out of 52. So still not below that half mark threshold. Moving on to Alola, and there are no gym leaders in Alola, so not applicable. Same score. It doesn't add or take away. I could have done the Island Kahunas. I thought about it, but I'm specifically talking about gym leaders here. So I decided against doing anything from Alola. Galar. First up, Milo. And I had to throw Brassius there because for some reason Milo didn't have an icon. Him having Gossifleur and Eldegoss, I always find a little confusing. Granted, there aren't many other grass types he could have used. I think Applin is maybe the only other pre-evolved grass type he could have pulled from native to the region. And Applin sucks, just intentionally. And Flapple and Appleton, I think, will be too strong for this point. So this is actually one time where, even though it is all gen, Pokemon from his generation, I kind of feel like he would have benefited from actually using some previous gen Pokemon. I'm gonna say it's bad. I legitimately feel like having just those two, especially considering he is the strongest recorded first gym leader. There's a lot of second gym leaders that aren't level 20. There's some third gym leaders that aren't level 20. But him having the highest level ace of any first gym leader and the two Pokemon are just of the same line just doesn't do it for me. I personally would keep with the round aesthetic and have Cottony, Downsweet, and Eldegoss to level 20. I think being the strongest first gym leader justifies having 3 Pokemon. Nessa, perfect team. I really don't have any notes. I'm not really sure if there are any other water types she really could have used. At least not like there's maybe like the fossils, but that wouldn't really work with her. But even then, even if there were other options, at least there's 2 out of 3 that are of this gen. So I'm fine with this team. It's a solid team. Kabu. I didn't have a Kabu icon, but I put Blaine. Although he does have the same, one of his Pokemon is Blaine's ace, so it's might as well be him. Kabu's an interesting case because Scorch is one of 2 fully evolved fire types they could have used. Colossal was the only other fully evolved fire type he could have possibly had, and that is Gordy's ace. So I wouldn't be right for him to have a Carkol. I don't think that'd be right. So instead, they just went with 2 very powerful fire types, and then Scorch. In theory, it's kind of cool that they all have Flash Fire, although that Arcanine has Intimidate, but it's fine. So because there weren't really any other options, I kind of have to go with meh. Like, you know, the other two Pokemon are kind of interchangeable. You could have done like Salazzle, Torkoal. There are a couple other options you could have thrown in there. But because there you didn't have any other Gen 8 options, so I'll say meh. Bea, B, I don't know. I'll say Bea. Bea, I really, really hate her team with a burning passion. First of all, Machamp. Why the heck she have a Machamp? There's a group of gym leaders from this gen that just randomly have Gigantamax Pokemon that are previous gen Pokemon for no reason, even though like they could have just given a current gen Pokemon a Gigantamax form and just called it a day. Like she does not need to have Machamp at all. Machamp is already the ace of one other very major trainer. You do not need to give her a Machamp. And on top of that, three of her Pokemon are previous gen Pokemon, even though Grapploct and Phalanx were right there. And arguably Surfetched, is also an evolved form of a previous gen Pokemon. It's a regional variant, but it's still at least related to a previous gen Pokemon. So like I don't like her team at all. I really, really think it's bad. So I personally switched it out with Phalanx, Pangoro, Grapploct, and then Gigantamax Surfetched. In my perfect world, Surfetched would have some kind of Gigantamax form. I went with Surfetched. I kind of waffled on the idea of it being Grapploct, although I like the idea of her and Alistair. I'll get to that in a second. Their aces being evolved forms of regional variants that are exclusive to the game they're from. So Surfetched, having the Gigantamax form being her ace, I think feels right. And I just like Pangoro, like I said before. And it's been two gens since the theoretical ace of Karina, so it's fine here. Alistair, his team has a lot of problems. First of all, Gengar. Again, I've complained before about how much I do not like how they just throw Gengar on things and they don't know what else to do. Gengar is also the ace of two major trainers, three if you count Fantina. So, yeah, Gengar did not need to be the ace of another Ghost Gym Leader. And on top of that, why is that just a Yamask? Bea had four fully evolved Pokemon. So why do you have a Yamask? I like Cursula being there, but Yamask easily could have been a Rodriguez. Nope, that's okay. Okay. And no Poltegeist at all. That like I like Mimikyu. I think that fits his aesthetic well. And as you'll see, I actually don't even add Poltegeist to the team that I give him. And I even like kind of uh, as I've done before, I even kind of go against my instincts here and give him a Dusclops, which kind of falls in. Which I am kind of falling into the same rut that they do, where I gave with Fantina and him Dusclopses. However, for him, it's purely aesthetic. I just feel like with his mask just screams Dusclops to me, or at least Duskull, and then obviously falls into Dusclops. Mimikyu, I think, also fits him well, so I wasn't going to give that up. But I am going to give him Runerigus and then Cursula getting a Gigantamax form. Again, I like his ace being the evolved form of a regional form that is from the game, that exclusive to the game that he is exclusive in. And I like the the duality between him and Bea both having that. So I'm not like in love with this team. I would have liked to give Poltegeist maybe instead of Mimikyu, or I don't know. I just feel like those two previous gen Pokemon fit his aesthetic enough where I'm okay with it. Opal. I like Opal's team a lot. Um, I don't love Mawile. It kind of became one of those fairy types they just kind of throw on because it was on Valerie's team, and then it's also on Opal's team. Then they also gave one to Bede, whatever. Your mean rival from this game. But as far as the team itself, you kind of had no other choice because every other fairy type was used by someone else, either Marnie or Beatty. Bede, I'm just gonna say Bede. Um, so Alcremie, you know, Alchemy and technically Weezing are the only current gen fairy types you really can use, and then the other two don't really matter. So it's a good team. However, I personally would have switched out Mawile for Shinotic. Shinotic got no love in Generation 7. And I feel like with the aesthetic of the city that she is the gym leader of, I feel like Shinotic would fit very well on her team. It would make her team very weak to poison, which is kind of what Mawile was helping with. But I personally am taking, representation over practicality, and also making Weezing kind of her pseudo ace. I think makes sense personally. Gordy, great team. Um, I really like the Shuckle. There aren't any other rock types outside of Sojourner and Colossal they really could have pulled from. Barbarical is fun since it's not weak to steel. Uh, so I I like the type variety throughout all these Pokemon. I think that's a very very solid team. I cannot say the same for her mom, for his mom, Melanie Lapras. Just like with Alistair and Bea, her ace is the ace of an Elite Four member from Gen 1. I don't know why they did that. Like that alone makes me give her a bad. Like if Lapras was on the team, I wouldn't really care. But because it's her ace, they specifically gave her Lapras as the ace. When Gordy was able to have a fire type a rock type from this gen as his ace, but no, they gave her Lapras. I don't I don't get it. I like the rest of her team, but not that, especially with no Mr. Mime, Mr. Rhyme on it. So I fixed it by giving her Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime or Mr. Rhyme doesn't really matter. It's technically slightly under level for Mr. Rhyme, but either way, they missed her something in that slot. Again, with Galarian, Darmanitan, Ice Cube, and then Frostmoth, I personally would give a Gigantamax one because in my head, I view Frostmoth and Scorch as counterparts. They're definitely not, considering Scorch is significantly stronger. I think it's like 30, but I think it should be 40 base stat total. It's 30 or 40 base stat totals stronger than Frostmoth, and that's a little disappointing, especially since you can't get a Frostmoth until way late in the game. And also, it has no Gigantamax form. I just feel like they should be parallels, but they're not. But in my perfect Pokemon game, they would be. So she would have a Frostmoth that can Gigantamax. Piers, another really good team. I almost want to say he should just have Toxtricity. Obviously, it wouldn't actually be a dark type, but it fits him so well that I'd be fine with it. It's one of the few times I would have been fine with them throwing on just a random not his type Pokemon when instead of Scrafty. Um, Especially since I'm pretty sure Marnie also has a Scrafty. I think some variety there would have been fun. But regardless, it's a very, very good team. There weren't I think the only other dark type you really could have used was Grimmsnarl, and obviously that's Marnie's. The other one being Morpeko, who Marnie also has. So Obstagoon was the only real choice you had. The other is just a variety of previous gen dark types that are at least from different generations. So there is some variety there. So I dig it. Again, maybe give him toxicity, but I'm fine with that being a rematch thing. Lastly, Rayhan, very good team. Um, the only thing I would personally change is maybe switch the levels of Flygon and Sandaconda. Have Sandaconda kind of be the pseudo ace. It's not a dragon type, but it's it's a serpentine Pokemon, obviously, and it also helps set up the sand in case Gigaliths run out. I really like how I think more trainers should do stuff like this where they don't necessarily have a concrete type, but they have a theme to it. Either like Pokemon caught from a certain area or some kind of strategy, like a Trick Room team or a rain, you know, weather team or a terrain team or like I don't know, Honey Tree or like something like that, or all Pokemon evolve by friendship. I really wish they had taken this and ran with it more so in Generation 9, but they did something else that I feel a little weird, but we'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, Rayhan, fantastic team. So from Galar, only 4 out of the 10 were bad teams. And 3 of those, were basically only because the ace was a Pokemon that was an ace of a Generation 1 Elite Four member. So we're down to 32 out of 62. Still just barely above 50%. So there's one more gen to go, and again, going into this video, I genuinely would have thought that over half, it would have obviously a little top heavy, but over half I would determine to be bad. But let's find out. Let's see if I determine after going over the Paldea gym leaders, if I determine if it's below or over half that are bad. Paldea. I struggled with how to rank these specific gym leaders because they made a choice to have generally 2 Pokemon from this generation, and then their ace is a Pokemon from a previous generation that Terra types into their type specialty. And most of the time, it works out pretty well, actually. Most of the time, there is some kind of theming or intentionality that makes us like, oh yeah, it makes sense that this Pokemon, could be associated with bugs. For example, Teddiursa, always eating honey. Honey is made by bees. Bees are bugs. Like that. That feels pretty cool, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rate them based on how well they encapsulate their theme that they are going for. And I honestly think that Katie does a good job of that. Like I said, Teddiursa, basically being all covered in honey, becoming a bug type, I think that works. However, I think it'll be fun if in my perfect Pokemon game, the gym leader has 3 Pokemon that are of their type, but their ace Terra types into a different type Pokemon. For example, we have Nimble, Raylor, and Spidops. And Spidops Terra types into an electric type. So how I'm going to be doing this is in all of my, fixes, they're more just, in this case, they're just really alternates. I took all of the types of gym leaders and just switched their Terras around. And I think I did a pretty good job balancing it because electric, its only weakness is ground. And you wouldn't really think to bring ground types or even ground type moves into an all bug gym leader. However, it terror typing into electric, you don't really have anything that's going to be super effective against it. So that's kind of my mindset going into this. I'm going to make them Terra into a type that's either defensively or offensively effective into the types that the type normally would be bad against. Yeah. Moving on. Brassius. Again, absolutely love Sudowoodo Terra typing into a grass type. If Sudowoodo weren't here, I think that pillar would make the entire concept fall completely. I legitimately think they picked Sudowoodo and then kind of worked backwards from there and like picked like it would be fun if Sudowoodo were actually a grass type and then did that with every gym leader. Um, but yeah, I really really like Sudowoodo here. Petalil, there are other grass types, like one or two others it could have been, but I don't know. They being small flowers feels right for Brassius, maybe. And obviously, Smoliv. I love Smoliv. Don't really know why it's a normal type, but it's whatever. But yeah, because Sudowoodo turning into a grass type is such a strong concept, it basically made me rank this entire region very differently. Because otherwise, I would have been kind of upset that they just picked random Pokemon that, that are previous gen Pokemon, therefore not spotlighting the Pokemon of this region. But I think the way they did it overall worked pretty well. I'm gonna say pretty good. I would do it. I personally would make Smoliv, Bramblegast, um, Bramblin, which he has like a thorn whip. I'm kind of surprised he didn't have one, but it's not a huge deal. And then Scovillain. Scovillain is pretty strong, although not stronger than a lot of other second gem Pokemon. I don't have it evolve into a water type because, not that it itself is weak to fire, but you're going to be using a lot of fire moves into a lot of other Pokemon. Its water, its main weakness is electric, and you're not going to be using electric type moves or Pokemon into the other Pokemon in its team. So I think both defensively and offensively, not that it can learn water types, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it, I feel like that works well for this team. And in a rematch, it can Terra Blast to, hit any fire types with a water move. I don't know. This one I'm personally giving a meh to for two reasons. One, I think she could have been slightly stronger to allow Wattrel to be a Kilowattrel. I feel like her having a Wattrel just doesn't. It's just a little too weak for this point in the game at the levels that we should be around at this point. Um, and also Miss Magius. Now, in theory, her terror typing a levitating Pokemon into electric is genius. I really like that. So that alone, gives it points. However, Miss Magius was already the ace of a previous gym leader, and I would have liked for them to spotlight some other Pokemon with levitate. Off the top of my head, I can't think of too many others that are native to or that are in Paldea they could have used. But regardless, those two things kind of make me mad a little bit. Also, Luxio, I don't know, a little boring. I kind of wish that Belly Bolt was spotlighted a little more on this team, but they executed the Terra typing, the Terra type idea very well here. So I'm cool with it, more or less. However, I personally would make it Kilowattrel, Luxio, and Belly Bolt Terra typing into grass. I I didn't really Like Luxio, there's not really that many other options. In a perfect world, there maybe would be, but regardless. Again, grass. It resists ground, the one type that electric is usually weak to. So, you try to use, bulldoze or even earthquake if you can get it up to that point into belly bolt, terry types into a grass type, and at least for one turn, it resists you. It resists you, and then it uses the ability to power up its next electric move and hits you even stronger. So, assuming you aren't a ground type yourself. So, I personally really like that interaction there. Next up, oh, and one thing I didn't mention, Belly Bolt is now on level 62. That allows kilowatts will be 25 in order to evolve. I also just think this gym could have benefited from the gym leaders ramping up a little faster than they did. I know the whole idea is that you can kind of battle them in any order you want, but they're they either should have completely honed in on that idea and made them scale to your level, or I don't know. I just feel like they could have done that a little better. Anyway, Kofu, pretty solid team. I like Crabominable. It's a crab. Other crab Pokemon are water, but it is not. So it terra types into a water type. That's cute. I personally think. And then Trio and Veluza, a solid rest of his team. I like it. I don't really have any complaints. So solid team. However, I personally would do. Um, I would do give him a Cramorant. I feel like Cramorant just fits him aesthetically. Um, uh, and he Terra types into an Ice type. This is one of those where I didn't really know where to put it. Um, it is offensively good into grass, which is obviously one of Water's major weaknesses. However, I don't really know of any ice moves that one trio can learn outside of Terra Blast, in theory. Um, but yeah, that's about all I got. I had to put it somewhere. This is the best place. It makes sense offensively, and you can say at this point in the game at level 32, it can no Terra Blast. Yeah, that's fine. Next up, Larry. Now I really like Larry's team. I think Komala matches his personality really well. I like the Dunsparce, and Staraptor is a really cool homage to him, or like foreshadowing to him being a you know Elite Four member who was flying type. So I like that a lot. There are other normal types he could have used instead of Kamala, but it fits him so well. I am very okay with it. So A+ for that. However, I would give him Mousehold, keep the Staraptor, which he then also uses on his flying type team, and make the Dunsparce his ace and give it the ghost type. I think that's pretty obvious. It resists or is immune to fighting, normal's main weakness, actually only weakness. So yeah, I think it'll be fun if it was a 3 segment or like the 3 segment to Dunsparce, which I don't know. Like you can either take it as he's lazy but he's lucky, or this is the one thing they put a lot of effort in to find the right to Dunsparce. Rhyme, her team's okay. I like Toxicity for Rhyme. She's a rapper. Toxicity is a punk singer. Like just those things kind of go hand in hand. I like that. Um, Bayonet and Mimikyu seem to be two of those Pokemon they just kind of throw on ghost type teams because they can't think of anything else. So it's whatever. There aren't The only other ghost types they really could have used are Gimmighoul and Cerulege. And in my headcanon, um I have places that those go other, elsewhere. Like maybe you can get away with her having Cerulege. Uh I'm not exactly sure, but um yeah, like I'm not super upset at her not having it, especially since it wouldn't be her ace anyway. So Regardless, I would say pretty solid. Um, for the team I would give her, I would make Houndstone her ace, give it the normal typing, making it immune to Ghost, kind of the reverse of the normal situation. Then add a Poltergeist, because why not? It didn't get any use on Alistair's team, so it can use here. Um, and again, I didn't really want to give Gimmighoul or uh, Sarah Ledge. I didn't really want to make them on her team because I feel they are ace potential. But I like the idea of Houndstone, this dog, this ghost dog becoming normal. I just like that. So moving on, Tulip. This team is fine. I kind of like how it's half psychic, half fairy. Nothing like Florges wasn't used on a previous ace, so it's fine. Nothing like to write home about, but it is a very solid team, just strength wise, regardless. So I'm gonna give that a thumbs up. And my change would be Espathra leading the team, and then Gardevoir, Medicham, which the little like mini game you do you play before is you like do like little dance routine with a Medicham. I know it's not hers, but it could be. And then uh for a giraffe being Terra Bug. It's another one of those where I had to put it somewhere, but I do kind of like it here. I would definitely give this for a giraffe Terra Blast and have it be able to be super effective into other psychic types and dark types who psychic usually struggles with. Granted, one being a fairy, one being a fighting would be like the biggest deal, but I still feel like you're going to want to bring a dark type to a psychic gym. So it being Terra Bug will help offensively against that. And finally, Grusha. This is actually the one single gym leader from this game that I have determined is actually a bad team. Yeah, they got one. I really do not like Altaria as his ace. Uh, it again, kind of with the Bismachius, it's already been the ace of a previous gym leader. Um, it doesn't really seem to fit his aesthetic. What like it's blue and it's fluffy. I don't really know what that's doing. Yeah, I can learn Ice Beam, but a lot of things can learn Ice Beam. I don't really know who they should have picked over Altaria, but that's not who I personally would have picked. I would have gone Glalie, Beartic, Weavile, and then Cetitan at level 52. And it Terra types into Psychic to be super effective into the fighting types and also resist the fighting types that it would normally struggle against. It is insane to me personally that the way Gen 8 is structured, there are two team star battles stronger than the eighth gym leader. That is weird to me. There can be one, I think that's fine, but having two, I don't love that. Like, I'm fine with the fighting team star member, you know, being at a higher level, implying that she beat Grusha. I think that's okay. But there being two just never really rubbed me the right way. Um, you can even have a thing where uh, you have to beat seven gym leaders before you can fight Grusha because the ice and the ghost gym leaders are right next to each other in game. The ghost gym leader is considered the sixth gym leader is not that far a journey to get to the ice gym leader. But I think it'd be cool if you try to fight the ice gym leader next, they tell you that you can't go in because you don't have seven badges or something. So that's the one time where the open world is they cut you off from going completely everywhere and anywhere you want. I think that will be fine. But Satitan being the strongest on 52 with Terra Psychic, I personally think that's so much better than it being 48 and having two different Team Star leaders being stronger. Okay, So after Paldea, we add one more to the board. Only a single gym leader from Paldea, I personally, with my criteria, with little tweaks, determined was actually a bad team. Meaning, only 33 out of 70 are bad teams. So, in conclusion, 47.14% of Pokemon gym leaders have bad teams. There you have it. It is, in fact, less than half. That was honestly surprising going into it. I thought it would have been more. Um, so, yeah, let me know down below what you think of this. Do you think there are any teams that I determined to be bad that you think are actually fine? Are there any of the fixes that I made that you disagree with? Are there any fixes that you would have done differently? Uh, Let me know down below. I'd like to have a discussion going, and I would be interested in making this into a series with rivals, gym leaders, etc. I have just a lot of ideas, and I want to get your input on all of that. So with that, I will see you all next time.